So you've onboarded staff members, team leads, and volunteers. You've done your one-on-one trainings, the orientation. You've shared the mission, the vision, the values, and what's expected of each particular position, along with the organizational policies and protocols. And now you're ready to let them loose to serve the house and live their purpose. You'd like to think that they're going to follow the plan to perfection until Jesus comes back. And all you'll have to do is honestly just manage the schedules. But the reality is, no one laminates their training sheets and pins it on their chest when they're serving. And sometimes, let's just be honest, we're all guilty of this. And we forget things, and bad habits start to sneak up on us, kind of have a little bit of mission drift. So the question we want to ask you today is, how do we protect the vision? How do we carry it and keep the vision alive in a consistent way, the way God downloaded it into the hearts of our pastors?
In the meantime, will you do us a favor? There are so many pastors and church leaders and volunteers in small towns across America that truly want to see healthy supernatural growth. They want to reach as many people for Jesus in their communities as possible. And you can help us get the podcast out to them by simply rating and reviewing this podcast wherever you consume this content. You can also share this episode with your friends on social media, and that would really, really help. So in advance, thanks so much. Now let's dig into today's talk. Welcome to the Small Town Big Church Leadership Podcast, a place for pastors, church leaders, and volunteers to grow themselves and the local church. We're pastors Brad and Misty Hilton, church planters in rural America. So if you've been around leadership at all, you've probably heard the phrase, inspect what you expect. We use it often in our world, and we would encourage you to use it as well. It's a reminder to be consistent and engaged at every level,
Right.
Whether you're a volunteer inspecting your own performance or a team lead inspecting the performance of your volunteers, or maybe just a staff member inspecting your team lead's performance and their leadership, or maybe you're the lead pastor inspecting your staff members' performance. Right. The question we want to ask is, why is it so important to inspect what you expect? Here's two big reasons. Reason number one, to preserve and protect the vision God downloaded into your pastors. As pastors, we can tell you the calling comes with a very heavy weight. You know, one day we will stand before God and give an account as to how we executed or did not execute perfect obedience and effort to fulfill the details of the assignment and the vision that He gave us to pastor His people and build His church. The mission, the vision or strategy, and values is all a download direct from Him and isn't to be customized and tweaked according to people's personal preference. There's a purpose behind every policy and protocol. More on that in a minute.
The second reason that you need to inspect what you expect is consistency in your organization. Here's an example. Whether you go to Chick-fil-A in Georgia or in Joplin, Missouri, there's two things you can be sure of. When you say thank you, they're going to say, my pleasure. And they won't be open on a Sunday. Think about it. How weird would it be as a customer if they said, you're welcome, and if the doors were open on Sunday? Honestly, it's part of the company's strategy to stand out against other food competitors. Someone said it this way. The chain's calling cards of being closed on Sunday and saying, my pleasure, are nearly as important to the brand identity as the food itself. And I would have to agree. Again, there's a purpose behind every policy and protocol. And we all have to trust the process and simply be consistent. I want to give you another example. This is one that honestly reveals how inconsistency actually yields frustration, bad customer service, or in our world, bad church member service, okay? At Mountain Movers, we have multiple parking lots. We have one-way entrance and one-way exit, just to try to make it easy and smooth on the flow. And we've got an incredible parking team. We got volunteers in each lot, at each entrance, and every exit, and everywhere in between, assisting church members in finding the perfect place to park. But I want you to just imagine for a moment, if the parking team member at the exit that was scheduled one week allows church members to come through the exit and park the opposite direction. But the next week, when they show up at that same exit with their blinker on, the volunteer that day asks them to drive around the block to the entrance and enter correctly. Here's what's going to happen. Either one, the church member is going to get really upset that a volunteer allowed it, but the next week they were not allowed to, or even worse, there could actually be a fender bender in the parking lot as one car is entering and the other one is exiting. Regardless, it's imperative that we stay consistent across the board.
Absolutely. And inspecting what you expect isn't as easy as you'd think, though.
Right.
We're going to give you 3 tips to help you to pull it off like a champ. Tip number 1, make sure what is expected has been communicated clearly and consistency.
So important.
So we use guideline training sheets for every position on our serve team. It's a job description, if you will, and we've done a podcast on this before. You should check it out. This lays out in writing everything that is expected for a volunteer in that specific role.
Right.
We talk about and refer to the expectations off the training sheet on a weekly basis by working little pieces of it into each team huddle.
Right. And I think about that, and I think so often people, we say things verbally, like this is what I expect, and we say it verbally, and we honestly think that people will remember.
It's just going to magically happen.
Right? But the fact is, people only remember about 10% of what we say. Mm-hmm. And so having it in writing is so important, but even more important, as you said, is refreshing weekly. And I would add to that you also need to always be looking to ask yourself, do I need as the leader to revise anything on the guideline training sheet or that job description?
We're continuously tweaking protocols.
Well, and things change, right? In an organization where there's growth happening all the time, sometimes we need to make some tweaks. We need to make some changes. And I would say if you have something on your guideline training sheet that isn't that important anymore and you can do away with it, do away with it. Yeah. Because the less your volunteers have to remember, the better. So the second tip is you can't inspect what others are doing if you're doing the work yourself.
Huge.
What do I mean by that? Well, let me give you another example. You can't coach and play. Think about it. If the coach was on the field playing the game and playing a certain position, he or she would be very intentionally thinking about the position they were playing, not what everybody else on the team was doing. And so I get it. In the church world, there's many times when as leaders, we are truly on the field. We are right there with our door greeters. Maybe we're one of them that day. Or we are, in the parking lot serving in a position, or we're serving in a kid zone ourselves as the leader. But here's what I want you to understand is that to really be able to inspect what we expect, we need to step off the field, coaches. We need to be able to come in. We need to be able to see the entire field or the entire zone we're overseeing. We need to see how every volunteer is interacting and how they're doing. And honestly, be able, number one, to just encourage and high five everybody for what they're doing, but then be able to make those small tweaks that are so important to keep us on track with the vision.
And we've helped a lot of leaders cross this threshold, kicking and screaming along the way.
It's hard.
Because it's difficult. A lot of leaders have given pushback at this approach because they feel like they should be busy doing the work. And they feel like they're not doing anything. They feel like they're not being productive if they're just stepping back and observing. But the best leaders are roamers. Yep. The best leaders are the ones that have worked themselves out of a job. They've trained everybody to do what needs to be done, and they get really good at just walking around and watching and inspecting what they expect. Okay, tip number 3 is if you don't correct everything, you won't have anything. This phrase has served us well for so many years, and I actually ripped this off of a college coach who I heard say this once, and he was undefeated year after year after year after year. And this is the one go-to that he loved sharing that he attributed to all of his success. Just identifying those little things. Sometimes they're big things, but
Yeah.
in most cases, just
They're very
these
small.
little issues that need to be made better, just a little bit
Yeah.
better. As we're inspecting what we expect, we're going to see those things that need to be tweaked. They need to be corrected. They need to be adjusted. And as leaders, as much as you don't like conflict, as much as you don't like to make those withdrawals, we have to.
Yeah.
We have to call out those things that need improvement.
Yes.
We need to call them out. We need to correct them. And we need to make them better and move
Yeah.
on.
And when I think about that, the other thing that's so important about this is habits are so easy to form.
Yes.
And bad habits are so hard to break. And so it's a whole lot easier when you've got a new volunteer and you start getting them trained to just be like, hey, you know what I was noticing? And then call it out, right? Like, you're doing so good in this area.
That's good to
This-
start with a compliment.
Yes, this one
Build 'em
little
up.
thing is something you can do better, okay? And I'm just going to refer back like to your training guide sheet or your guideline training sheet. And so it doesn't have to be a big deal. It doesn't need to be like this big weighty conversation, right? That's why we're constantly tweaking and constantly correcting so that we don't get in that place of having these bad habits in place. Those are hard to break.
That's good.
If you didn't catch the episode before this one, I would encourage you to go back and either watch or listen, because we talked about making deposits and withdrawals. And it's going to be so crucial that as a leader, when you are inspecting what you expect, that you have enough deposits in that relationship or with that church member to be able to make those tiny tweaks.
Because when you correct incorrect behavior, no matter how you look at it,
it's a withdrawal.
it's a withdrawal.
Well, and when you ask anything of anyone, it's a withdrawal. So go back, check out that episode. We'll link it for you below. Today, we would just want to say thank you so much for joining us. We truly hope that each and every episode is helping you to advance the kingdom of God and grow your leadership. We'll see you next time.